The world had always dreamed of the impossible: flying cars, invisible cloaks, and weapons that could fire without fire. But in the early 2030s, one discovery began to blur the line between dream and reality. It didn't come from a secret alien signal or a lost civilization, but from a small, forgotten laboratory by the sea. In that quiet facility, a group of researchers worked day and night on something that most people would never believe could exist. A weapon that could launch a piece of metal faster than sound, faster than any missile, and without using a single drop of fuel. It was called the Railgun. For years, the world's armies had imagined such a weapon, but no one had ever made it work the way it should. The problem was always the same: too much heat, too much energy, and not enough stability. But one man in that team refused to give up. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a politician. Just a man who wanted to understand energy. His name was Dr. Rehan Malik. Rehan had been fascinated by magnets since childhood. While others played with toys, he would break apart old radios and speakers just to see how invisible forces could move metal. That same curiosity drove him all his life. He believed that everything, from lightning to stars, could be understood if you looked close enough. The idea of a railgun wasn't new, but Rehan's version was different. Instead of using traditional electric current, his design focused on electromagnetic resonance, a rhythm of energy waves that strengthened each other until they reached unbelievable power. His team thought it was madness at first, but he kept pushing. He used to say, "Electricity doesn't like chaos. Give it harmony and it'll sing for you." Months turned into years. There were hundreds of failed tests. Every explosion, every burned wire, every sleepless night brought him closer to something extraordinary. Then one morning, under the pale light of dawn, everything changed. The prototype stood at the edge of the testing field, long, metallic, and silent. The ocean wind carried the smell of salt and machine oil. The team gathered around, nervous and excited. Rehan gave a simple nod, and the power generator started humming. The air felt thick, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. And then it happened. The moment the trigger was pressed, a deafening crack tore through the air. The projectile shot out, leaving a blinding white streak behind it. The sound was unlike anything anyone had heard before, a rolling thunder that seemed to shake the ground. When the dust cleared, the target was gone. It hadn't shattered. It had completely vanished into pieces. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then cheers erupted. Some of them cried, others hugged. The impossible had become possible. That day, the media called it the thunder of tomorrow. The world watched as videos of that test spread across every news channel and social platform. For the first time, a weapon had been created that didn't rely on chemicals or explosions, only pure energy. It was clean, fast, and terrifyingly powerful. Governments from around the world came running. Defense companies offered blank checks. Rehan's small seaside lab became the heart of a new arms race, one based on electromagnetic warfare. But while the world saw celebration, Rehan felt something else: unease. During the test, he had noticed something strange. For a split second, the air around the projectile had warped, almost like a mirage on a hot road. He dismissed it as heat distortion, but the image kept haunting him. In the following months, his team conducted more tests. Each one was bigger, louder, and more controlled. The railgun's accuracy and speed amazed everyone. Cities lined up to fund the project. It became a matter of pride. Whoever owned this technology would rule the skies. But the strange thing Rehan saw that day happened again. Not once, not twice, but multiple times. Each time the railgun fired, a small flicker appeared, a faint distortion in the magnetic field. The equipment recorded sudden spikes, small but consistent. It was as if space itself trembled for a moment. When he tried to share his concern, no one listened. The officials only cared about results. The generals visiting the lab smiled and shook his hand, saying things like, "You've made the world safer and your invention will end wars." But deep down, he wasn't sure. At night, Rehan would sit by his office window, looking at the waves crashing against the rocks. He wondered if peace born from fear was real peace at all. He had started with curiosity and science, not destruction. He wanted to explore energy, not weaponize it. But now the same discovery that fascinated him was being turned into something he barely recognized. Still, he couldn't ignore the strange readings. He worked quietly, recording every distortion that appeared during testing. The data didn't lie. Something unusual was happening. The railgun wasn't just firing metal. It was interacting with the environment in ways no one could explain. One night, while analyzing the magnetic logs, he noticed a pattern. The distortions appeared exactly 0.02 seconds after each firing. They didn't match any known reaction or interference. The energy didn't dissipate. It moved, almost like it jumped somewhere else. He wasn't sure what that meant, but the thought gave him chills. He shared his findings with his closest colleague, Layla, a quiet but brilliant engineer who handled the railgun's control systems. She studied the data for days before finally saying, "If what you're seeing is real, then we're bending more than just magnetic fields. We might be bending space itself." At first, Rayhan laughed. It sounded ridiculous. But the more they analyzed the data, the more it made sense. The electromagnetic pulse generated by the railgun wasn't just linear. It created a brief, intense field strong enough to affect the fabric of space for a microsecond. Rayhan began to realize that this machine, built to launch projectiles, might be touching forces far beyond human understanding. But he couldn't prove it yet, and if he told the military, they would either dismiss it or use it in ways he couldn't control. So he decided to stay silent and keep watching. Months passed, and the railgun project grew into something massive. New branches were built. More scientists joined. Tests were now being conducted in deserts and on naval ships. The sound of that thunderous shot became familiar to the world, a sound that symbolized power. In schools, children learned about the railgun revolution. Documentaries praised the innovation. People said humanity had entered a new era, one where wars would end quickly and efficiently. But deep inside the original lab, Rayhan and Layla kept noticing something that didn't fit. Each time the weapon fired, the sensors picked up faint energy traces in locations where the shot never reached, like invisible echoes appearing miles away. It was as if pieces of that energy were teleporting. One evening, after another long test, Rayhan stood outside, watching the sunset reflect on the steel surface of the railgun. The wind was cold, but his mind was restless. He thought about how one spark of curiosity had led to something that could change everything, and maybe not for the better. That night, the power in the facility flickered for a few seconds. The computers glitched and strange data filled the screens. The sensors went haywire, recording energy spikes that no one could explain. For a moment, everything was silent. Then a bright flash filled the control room, like lightning trapped inside glass. It was gone in an instant. When they checked the logs, they found something that made no sense. The projectile they had fired appeared twice, once at the target and once several kilometers away. No one could explain it. Some said it was a sensor malfunction. Others whispered that they had just witnessed something impossible. Rayhan didn't say a word. He just stared at the data on the screen, his heart beating faster. Somewhere inside him, he knew what had happened wasn't an error. It was a sign, a glimpse of a discovery that could either save humanity or destroy it. As the night grew darker, the waves outside crashed louder against the shore, and the sound of thunder rolled far in the distance, not from the sky, but from the weapon humanity had just unleashed. The world saw only power that day. But Rayhan saw something else, the beginning of a doorway and a warning written in the language of energy itself. The world changed faster than anyone expected. Within just a few years, the railgun became more than an invention. It became a symbol of human pride. Every nation wanted one. Every general wanted to control it, and every scientist wanted to be part of the project. What began in a small seaside lab now stretched across continents. Giant testing ranges, high-security labs, and underground facilities were built only for one purpose: to perfect the railgun. The weapon that once looked like a long piece of metal now took the shape of sleek machines placed on ships, satellites, and even high-altitude platforms. Governments claimed it would bring peace. They said the world would never need nuclear weapons again. They said wars would end before they even began. The news channels called it the technology that will stop bloodshed. But deep down, some people wondered if humanity had just found a new way to control fear instead of ending it. For the team that built the first prototype, the attention brought both fame and pressure. Every day they faced new visitors, scientists, officers, investors, and politicians, all asking the same question: can it go faster? No one cared about the side effects, the strange flickers, or the unexplained energy spikes that appeared after every shot. Rehan, the scientist who had once dreamed of exploring energy, now felt like a stranger in his own lab. He spent most of his nights alone, going through test data in silence. What bothered him most wasn't the success. It was the patterns he saw hidden in the numbers. Every time the railgun fired, sensors picked up faint distortions, the same mysterious waves that appeared during their first big test. It was small enough for others to ignore, but too consistent to be random. The field bent in ways that shouldn't have been possible. He started keeping a private notebook, writing down every unusual reading. He compared results from different facilities, even from tests conducted thousands of miles apart. The pattern was always the same. A brief pulse that looked like space itself was trembling. He didn't tell the higher-ups. He had tried before and they brushed him off. It's just electromagnetic interference, they said. The equipment's too sensitive. But he knew better. Months later, something unexpected happened. One of the naval ships equipped with a railgun reported a strange failure. During a live fire demonstration, the projectile disappeared mid-air. It didn't explode, it didn't fall into the sea. It simply vanished. Moments later, a high-speed radar station picked up a metallic object crashing into the water almost 50 kilometers away. No one could explain it. Officially, the report said sensor malfunction, but Rehan managed to get the internal data logs from the ship. What he saw confirmed his worst suspicion. The railgun had done more than just fire. It had opened something. He shared his findings with his trusted colleague Layla, who had been working quietly on the weapons control systems. She didn't believe him at first. "Objects don't just vanish," she said, shaking her head. But when she saw the data, the delay, the split-second magnetic fold, her face turned pale. They realized the impossible. The railgun had generated enough electromagnetic pressure to bend the surrounding space for a fraction of a second. The projectile hadn't been destroyed. It had jumped through space and reappeared somewhere else. It was not teleportation as people imagined in science fiction, but it was close, very close. The discovery scared them both. They knew if the military found out, it wouldn't stay a secret for long. This was no longer just a weapon. This was a doorway to something that humanity was not ready for. Still, curiosity got the better of them. Late at night, when the main facility was empty, they ran small-scale experiments. Instead of metal projectiles, they used small sensors and magnetic particles. What they found was beyond imagination. Sometimes the objects reappeared with a tiny delay. Sometimes they vanished completely. No signal, no trace. And once, the sensors picked up faint echoes of the object returning from a slightly different angle, like a reflection coming from nowhere. Rehan stared at the data and whispered, "We're touching the edges of reality." They decided to keep their findings secret, hiding the results in encrypted drives, labeled as test calibration files. But secrets have a way of slipping through cracks. Months later, rumors began to spread in the scientific community. Whispers about matter displacement and electromagnetic tunneling. A few research institutes in Europe and Asia started independent studies. The race that once began with a weapon had now shifted towards something even more ambitious: teleportation. Governments saw an opportunity. If teleportation was possible, it could change everything: transportation, medicine, trade, even space exploration. The world would move without moving. Publicly, officials denied any such project existed. But behind closed doors, secret funding poured into advanced teleportation labs. Rehan's quiet seaside research center was now guarded like a fortress. New scientists arrived unaware of the real reason behind their work. As more nations joined, tensions grew. The media started calling it the Silent War. Countries that once fought over land now fought over data. The railgun had brought peace through fear. Now teleportation promised power beyond imagination. One evening, as Rehan walked through the testing bay, he stopped to watch a new generation of the railgun being assembled. It was bigger, more refined, and capable of energy bursts 10 times stronger than the first model. He watched the engineers talking proudly about efficiency and speed, but all he could think about was the distortion they were about to create again. He knew he couldn't stop it. He wasn't even sure if he wanted to. Curiosity had always been his greatest strength, and his greatest weakness. He told himself that maybe, just maybe, understanding this phenomenon could lead to something beautiful, not destructive. The first long-distance test was scheduled for a cold morning. As the sun rose, the sea reflected its light on the metal surface of the weapon. The countdown began. When the trigger was pressed, the world seemed to freeze for a heartbeat. The projectile disappeared in a flash. But this time, the sensors didn't just record energy spikes. They showed something entirely new. The energy field around the railgun folded like a wave crashing inward. For half a second, gravity sensors recorded values that shouldn't exist on Earth. Miles away, another testing station reported an identical energy signature appearing out of nowhere, perfectly synchronized with the shot. The scientists couldn't believe it. One of them whispered, "It's like we fired through space itself." The test was declared a success. The footage went viral again. The public saw another triumph of technology. Commentators praised humanity's unstoppable progress. The weapon that once ended wars, one headline read, now opens doors to a new future. But behind the celebrations, Rehan and Layla sat in silence, staring at the data screens. They both knew what the world didn't, that humanity had just taken its first step into a place it didn't understand. Days later, Layla brought him a file showing strange readings from one of the nearby satellites. The gravitational pull in the test area had shifted slightly for a few minutes after the shot. It was minor, something most people would dismiss as a sensor glitch. But for them, it meant one terrifying thing. The railgun was beginning to affect not just space, but gravity itself. Rehan felt a weight in his chest. He tried to convince himself it was just coincidence, but deep down he knew it wasn't. The railgun wasn't just bending air or magnetism anymore. It was bending the universe's fabric, even if just a little. The world continued to celebrate. Conferences were held. Awards were given. Rehan was called a pioneer of modern physics. Cameras followed him everywhere, but every smile he gave felt hollow. He saw the excitement in people's eyes and wondered how long it would last before the same excitement turned into fear. Late one night, unable to sleep, he walked outside to the cliff where the ocean crashed below. The wind was cold, the stars distant and quiet. He thought about how far humanity had come, from fire to flight, from the wheel to the railgun, and yet, the hunger to push limits never changed. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "We've opened a door we don't even understand." The next morning, the facility prepared for another test, this one larger than anything before. The railgun was to be powered at full capacity for the first time. Officials from several countries attended, smiling for cameras. It was meant to be a symbol of unity, of progress. But for Rehan and Layla, it was something else entirely. A moment that would decide whether humanity had gone too far. The countdown began once again. 10, 9, 8. The generators roared. The ground trembled. The air crackled with electricity. And as the number reached 1, Rehan felt something deep in his chest, a strange, heavy silence before the sound. Then came the thunder. The shot echoed across the ocean, louder and longer than ever before. But this time something different happened. The sky flickered faintly, a brief shimmer like the reflection of a broken mirror. It lasted only a second, then disappeared. The crowd cheered. The officials clapped. The test was declared perfect. But Rehan couldn't take his eyes off the sky. He knew what he had seen. A ripple, a warning. Something beyond human control had stirred. And it was only the beginning. The day after the last test, something felt different. The world looked the same blue sky, the same crashing waves, the same busy laboratories. But there was a quiet tension in the air. It was like nature itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what humanity would do next. News of the successful high-energy railgun test spread across the planet. Every major channel ran the same headlines: humanity breaks distance barrier. Scientists and politicians called it a controlled spacefold. They said it was the greatest scientific step since the discovery of electricity. People were celebrating without even understanding what had actually happened. But inside the research facility, the mood was completely different. The data from the last test was full of strange readings, magnetic distortions, brief gravitational shifts, and light waves that didn't behave normally. None of it made sense. The shot hadn't just traveled, it had jumped. For most people it was just a word. But for Rayhan it was a warning. He knew energy could bend, but this was something else. Space itself had responded. Not just the air, not just the atmosphere, but the invisible structure that holds the universe together. Layla spent the next few nights studying every frame of the high-speed camera footage. When she slowed it down to a fraction of a second, she noticed something unbelievable. Just before the projectile vanished, the air around it twisted like water swirling down a drain. And then, for less than a blink, there was light, pure and white, bending into itself before disappearing completely. When she showed it to Rayhan, he stared at the screen without saying a word for several seconds. Then he quietly said, "We didn't fire a bullet. We tore a hole." Neither of them slept that night. They sat in the dim light of the lab, surrounded by screens full of incomprehensible numbers. The hum of the equipment filled the silence. Both of them knew what it meant. Teleportation wasn't a dream anymore. They had already done it, even if by accident. They decided to run another private test without telling the higher-ups. This time, instead of a large projectile, they used a small metallic disc with a tracking chip inside. When they activated the rail system, the air vibrated again. A blinding flash filled the room, and in an instant the disc vanished. They waited. For a few seconds there was nothing. Then one of the motion sensors beeped. The disc had reappeared 5 meters away from the launcher. Not destroyed. Not melted. Perfectly intact. Layla covered her mouth in shock. Rayhan felt his heart pounding. They had just witnessed matter teleportation, the first in human history. But he didn't feel excitement. He felt fear. Because if such power existed, it could change not only the future, but the balance of the entire universe. They kept the test secret, recording everything carefully. But secrets never stay buried for long. The data they saved on the system was automatically backed up to the central military server. Within hours, officials were notified that an anomaly had been detected during off-schedule testing. By the next morning, men in suits arrived at the lab. They asked questions that sounded polite but carried hidden pressure. What exactly did you test? What kind of readings did you get? Can you repeat it? Rayhan tried to act calm, but he knew they already suspected. He didn't lie. He just didn't tell them everything. But the government didn't need to be told twice. They knew what teleportation meant. If objects could move instantly across distance, that could change the entire world. And whoever controlled it would control everything. Within weeks, new research divisions were formed in secret. The project got a new name: Project Horizon. What once started as a weapon program now became a race to control movement itself. At first, it sounded hopeful. Teleportation could end transportation costs, make shipping instant, and help save lives in emergencies. But deep inside the labs, the experiments were far from safe. Every new test brought new problems. Sometimes the teleported objects came back slightly damaged. Surfaces melted, shapes distorted, as if space had chewed them up and spit them back out. Other times, they didn't return at all. The data showed strange echoes, faint energy patterns that looked like shadows of the original object, appearing and disappearing at random. Rayhan called them ghost traces. They weren't real objects, but energy leftovers, proof that something remained in space even after the object was gone. It was like every teleport left a small scar on the universe. He tried to warn the officials. He told them, every jump is taking something from space and leaving something behind. But they didn't listen. To them, it was progress. Within 2 years, teleportation was no longer a secret. The news broke to the public after a major breakthrough. Scientists had successfully teleported a package across an entire continent. Crowds cheered, industry celebrated, and investors called it the Age of Instant Movement. For the first time in history, humanity didn't just travel through space, and it bent space to its will. Factories were built using teleportation hubs. Ships no longer needed to sail. Planes became outdated. A person could send goods or data instantly from one side of the world to another. Pollution levels dropped. The economy soared. It looked like the world had finally achieved harmony through technology. But behind the scenes, scientists began to notice the same thing Rayhan had seen years ago: distortions. Small at first, almost unnoticeable, GPS systems started glitching in certain areas. Satellites picked up strange magnetic waves. Even time measurements from atomic clocks began to drift by tiny fractions of a second. The first major sign came during a large-scale teleportation test across the Pacific Ocean. Everything seemed fine until the moment the cargo reappeared. Except it didn't reappear exactly where it should have. It landed several kilometers off target, floating slightly above the ground for a few seconds before dropping heavily to the earth. Witnesses said it looked like reality itself had flickered. When the data was analyzed, scientists were shocked to find that for a brief moment, less than a millisecond, the object had been duplicated. Two identical energy signatures existed in two places at once, one real, one not. That meant teleportation wasn't just moving objects, and it was copying them for a fraction of time. And that duplication was interfering with the universe's natural balance. Rayhan, now older and quieter, tried to explain it to the new generation of scientists. "We're not sending things through space," he said. "We're forcing space to make room for them, and it doesn't like it." But no one wanted to stop. The world had become dependent on the technology. Millions of jobs, industries, and economies relied on it. Stopping it now would mean collapsing everything. Then came the night that changed everything during a major teleportation event, a global demonstration meant to showcase the largest mass transfer in history. Something went terribly wrong. The energy levels spiked higher than predicted. Instead of a smooth jump, the field twisted violently. Monitors froze. The air vibrated with a low hum, deep and unsettling. Witnesses described seeing lights bending like the stars themselves were shifting. The cargo disappeared as planned, but when it reappeared, people screamed. For a few seconds, the cargo was there and not there at the same time, flickering between existence and nothingness. Then, all at once, the light burst outward in silence. When the field settled, everything seemed normal. But the world's magnetic readings changed. Satellite communication dropped for hours. In some places, clocks ran backward for several seconds. Birds flew in strange circles. People described feeling dizzy, like gravity itself was confused. The media called it the light ripple. Scientists tried to calm the public, saying it was a harmless atmospheric event. But Rayhan knew the truth. Teleportation had finally broken something invisible. The balance that had kept the universe steady was now shaking. In the following weeks, strange events became more common. Radio signals picked up echoes of old transmissions, some from years ago. The sky showed faint lines of light that faded as quickly as they appeared. And in certain labs, scientists reported seeing brief reflections of themselves during teleport tests, reflections that didn't move in sync. Layla called it space remembering itself. Rayhan knew it was much worse. Every jump, every test, every teleport had left behind fragments of energy, like cracks in a mirror. The universe wasn't meant to be folded this way, but now it was too late. Humanity had crossed the line between discovery and danger. The railgun that once symbolized power had become the seed of something that could unravel everything. And as he watched another teleportation broadcast on the screen, showing smiling faces and proud speeches, he couldn't help but wonder if anyone would listen before the sky itself started to fall. The balance of the cosmos had begun to tremble, and humanity didn't even realize it. Years passed, and teleportation was no longer something that amazed people. It had become part of daily life. What was once a dream only seen in science fiction had now become as common as airplanes once were. The world had changed so fast that people barely noticed how unnatural it had all become. Cities had teleportation hubs instead of airports. You could step into a booth in one country and appear in another within seconds. Cargo ships were replaced by massive teleportation stations that moved goods instantly across the world. Even rescue teams used teleportation for emergencies, saving lives faster than ever before. Everyone called it the age of light travel. Humanity believed it had finally mastered distance, but deep down, a quiet fear started growing among scientists who worked behind closed doors. Strange patterns were being noticed, things that couldn't be explained by simple physics. Satellites orbiting the Earth began reporting odd gravitational shifts. Some places on the planet had magnetic fields that flickered unpredictably. Time in a few regions ran slower by fractions of a second, though no one could understand why. The public didn't know about these things. Governments chose silence. They said it was all part of fine-tuning the system. But the truth was different. The fabric of space was showing cracks, small, invisible ones spreading quietly like spiderwebs, and who had withdrawn from the public spotlight, spent his days in isolation, studying the reports he secretly received from former colleagues. He no longer worked in official labs. He didn't trust anyone who claimed to be fixing the problem. He knew humanity was only patching a wound that couldn't heal. Every teleport left behind what he called an echo, a faint memory of the object that had passed through space. It was like a fingerprint left in the universe, invisible but powerful. Over time, these echoes were overlapping, interfering with one another, creating ripples in reality. He had once believed human curiosity was beautiful. Now he feared it had gone too far. Meanwhile, people were noticing strange things in their daily lives. Some travelers reported seeing flashes of light just before teleporting, flashes that looked like brief reflections of themselves. Others claimed they heard faint echoes like whispers during the process. Scientists dismissed these stories as tricks of the mind caused by high-energy magnetic fields, but they didn't know everything. One afternoon, a teleportation hub in South Asia temporarily shut down after multiple passengers vanished for several seconds mid-transfer before reappearing, confused but unharmed. Security footage showed something disturbing. During the delay, the passengers' images appeared doubled, like two versions of each person standing side by side, flickering. It lasted less than a second, but it was enough to send chills through the scientific community. Rehan read about the event in a leaked report. He didn't sleep that night. He walked along the beach near his small house, listening to the waves crash against the rocks. The same sea that once inspired him now sounded like a warning. He whispered to himself, "We broke something we don't understand." Governments kept expanding teleportation anyway. The world had become addicted to it. Trade, economy, travel, everything depended on it. Stopping it now would mean chaos. So they ignored the warnings, calling people like Rehan old scientists stuck in the past. But the universe doesn't care about human pride. Soon, the signs became impossible to ignore. Astronomers began noticing something strange. Certain stars in the sky seemed slightly out of position. The changes were tiny but real. Space telescopes recorded light bending oddly, as if the laws of distance were shifting. At first, experts blamed software errors, but when the same thing happened again, they realized the truth. The distortions were coming from Earth itself. The teleportation waves had grown so strong and frequent that they were sending ripples through space. It wasn't just the planet that was affected. The very balance of gravity between the Earth, Moon and Sun began to shift. The difference was microscopic, but for cosmic forces, even a small change could have huge consequences. One night, while studying satellite data, Layla discovered something terrifying. The moon's orbit had slightly altered, not enough for the public to notice, but enough for scientists to panic. It wasn't natural. The cause was traced back to a series of large teleportation tests conducted over the Pacific region. She sent Rehan a secret message. "The moon has moved." Those words stayed in his mind like an echo he couldn't silence. Humanity had reached a point where its inventions were strong enough to touch the stars, and now it was doing so without control. Soon, strange weather patterns began to emerge. The skies in certain areas showed unexplained light arcs at night, as if small cracks in the air glowed for moments and disappeared. Animals became restless near teleportation zones. Migrating birds changed their routes. Compasses spun randomly. Most people ignored these things, too distracted by the comforts technology brought. The world was faster, cleaner, and richer. People didn't want to believe the same machines that gave them everything could also destroy everything. Rehan watched it all from a distance. His health was fading, but his mind stayed sharp. He continued writing notes, trying to understand if there was any way to reverse the damage. But the deeper he studied, the more hopeless it seemed. He noticed that the distortions had a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. It was as if the Earth was trying to stabilize itself, fighting against the unnatural shifts caused by teleportation. But each new jump weakened that rhythm a little more. Then came the day that changed everything. A massive teleportation network was being prepared, one that would connect the entire planet. It was meant to move thousands of tons of cargo across continents instantly. It was the biggest operation ever attempted, called Global Sync Day. It was meant to be a celebration of human progress. Rehan begged the officials he still had contact with to cancel it. He sent letters, warnings, and reports. No one listened. It's safe, they said. It's tested. But no one had tested what would happen when the entire planet's teleportation fields activated at once. The event began at sunrise. People cheered as they watched screens showing goods and vehicles disappearing from one side of the world and reappearing on the other. It worked perfectly, at least for the first few minutes. Then, in multiple cities, the skies began to flicker. Light twisted strangely like reflections on broken glass. Birds scattered. The air felt heavy, almost electric. Within moments, power grids across several countries failed. Satellites stopped responding. The planet's magnetic field spiked violently, causing aurora lights to appear even near the equator. People looked up in awe, thinking it was beautiful. But scientists stared in horror. The teleportation network had overloaded the planet's electromagnetic core. The Earth had been forced to process too much space distortion at once. The field surrounding the planet, the invisible shield that protected it from cosmic radiation, had started fluctuating. It only lasted for about 15 minutes. But those 15 minutes changed everything. After the event ended, global systems went dark for hours. Clocks ran off sync. Communication networks reset themselves. The world didn't know it yet, but something fundamental had shifted. In the following weeks, researchers noticed the stars looked slightly different again. Space itself seemed unstable around Earth, not enough to cause immediate danger, but enough to suggest that the balance of the cosmos had been disturbed. Rihan received data confirming what he feared most. The distortions had reached beyond Earth's atmosphere. Humanity had shaken the balance of the solar system. He looked at the night sky that evening. The stars twinkled as always, but some of them looked dimmer. The universe was quiet, but it wasn't the same. Something had changed forever. He whispered softly, "We tried to move faster than light, and now light itself is slowing down to watch us fall." The media, of course, never reported any of this. Governments assured people that everything was fine. Life returned to normal, or at least what people thought was normal. But in scientific circles, silence replaced celebration. Whispers began spreading among researchers that teleportation should be limited, maybe even stopped. But it was too late. Too many industries, too many lives, and too much power depended on it. Humanity couldn't go back, not without collapsing everything it had built. And so, people carried on, teleporting goods, traveling through light, trusting the machines that had silently broken the universe's rhythm. Rihan, now weak and older, sat by his window one last evening. He watched the ocean glimmer under the moonlight. The same ocean that had watched humanity's first step into this discovery now seemed to reflect its consequences. He realized that the railgun, that first spark of innovation, had been the seed of all this. It had been beautiful once, full of hope and wonder, but somewhere along the way, humanity had forgotten that even the smallest push against nature comes with a price. As the wind carried the sound of waves, he closed his eyes, whispering words that only the night could hear. We folded space to escape distance, but we only ended up folding ourselves into the unknown. And far above him, beyond the clouds, something faint and silent pulsed in the sky, a shimmer that wasn't a star, an echo perhaps of everything humanity had done to the balance of the universe. Months passed after the global sync day, and the world slowly returned to its usual rhythm, or at least that's what people thought. The screens were filled again with news of progress and new teleportation hubs. Everyone believed the short blackout had been nothing more than a technical glitch. People wanted to move forward, not look back, but not everyone could ignore what had happened. Scientists working in secret observatories noticed strange things, signals from space that didn't fit any pattern known before. Some areas of the sky had faint distortions, like invisible waves bending the light of distant stars. When Rihan heard about this, he wasn't surprised. He had expected it. The universe was reacting. He tried to warn whoever would listen, but by now most of the scientific community had turned away from him. They called him the old man who saw ghosts in equations. But Rihan wasn't seeing ghosts. He was seeing truth. He spent his nights staring at the dark sky through his small telescope, feeling as though something was quietly watching back. The stars seemed less constant now, as if the distance between them had changed. He often felt dizzy when looking up too long, as if even space itself was unstable. At first, only sensitive instruments detected the disturbances. Then came the visual signs. People across the world started recording unusual lights appearing for a few seconds in the sky, glowing circles or soft arcs of color, like floating mirrors reflecting something unseen. Governments called them atmospheric illusions. But in private, researchers admitted these events had a strange energy signature similar to teleportation fields. It meant something was echoing those fields back toward Earth. A delayed reaction from space. Layla, still working with a small group of independent scientists, found herself chasing these clues day and night. She had once believed humanity's inventions could fix everything, but now she wasn't so sure. Every new discovery only revealed a deeper problem. In one of her reports, she wrote, "Space is not silent anymore. It's responding." Rayhan read her message and sighed deeply. He had long known this moment would come, the point where humanity's interference became too large to be ignored. What no one understood was that teleportation wasn't just bending space. It was disturbing the balance between dimensions themselves. Every time an object teleported, a small fragment of its presence and a faint trace of its existence was left behind. Over time, those traces had formed patterns, and now those patterns were beginning to overlap and connect in unpredictable ways. Soon, these distortions began to affect daily life. One morning, a group of travelers in a teleportation terminal experienced something terrifying. When they stepped into the teleportation chamber, the lights flickered, and for a split second, everyone saw their own reflection staring back at them. Not in mirrors, but in the air. It was like standing face to face with yourself for a heartbeat before vanishing into light. They arrived safely at their destination, but they felt strange afterward, disoriented, as if part of them hadn't arrived with the rest. Doctors found nothing wrong, yet people began whispering that teleportation was starting to take something from its users. But no one dared stop it. The system had grown too large. Economies, jobs, governments, everything was now connected through teleportation. It had replaced shipping, aviation, and even many traditional technologies. Humanity had built its world around it, and there was no going back. Meanwhile, scientists discovered that the energy readings from teleportation stations were starting to fluctuate in a new pattern. The frequencies matched cosmic signals detected from deep space, as if the universe itself was echoing the same rhythm. Back, it was like a conversation was happening, but no one knew between whom. Layla and Rehan met once more, in a small research center hidden away from public eyes. The room was dimly lit, filled with screens and humming instruments. Layla looked exhausted but determined. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a set of graphs on the monitor. "Every teleport leaves behind an echo that returns after an unpredictable delay. The stronger the teleport, the stronger the echo, and these echoes are increasing faster than before." Rayhan leaned closer, his hands trembling slightly. "Do you know what that means?" Layla nodded slowly. "The universe is reflecting us." Her voice was soft but filled with dread. They both knew this wasn't just a technical issue. It was something far beyond human understanding. The very structure of space was adapting to human interference, like a body reacting to an infection. That night, after everyone had left the lab, Rayhan stayed behind, staring at the glowing data on the screen. He whispered quietly, "We taught the universe to notice us, and now it does." Days turned into weeks, and the echoes began to manifest in more visible ways. Some teleportation events started showing a strange delay shimmer, an afterimage that appeared seconds after the teleport finished, like a ghost copy of the object flickering in and out before fading. At first, people found it fascinating. They posted videos online calling it the magic effect. But soon, larger teleportations began to cause unpredictable power surges, strange noises, and unexplained electrical discharges. Some teleportation hubs had to be shut down temporarily. Still, governments insisted it was under control. Just a matter of fine-tuning, they said. But behind closed doors, even the top scientists were terrified. The distortions were no longer just happening near teleportation zones. They were spreading naturally through the atmosphere. Weather balloons recorded sudden drops in air density, and magnetic compasses twisted unpredictably. In some regions, satellites picked up what looked like faint holographic outlines of continents appearing miles away from where they should be. It was as if reality itself was misplacing its own coordinates. Rayhan spent his last remaining strength trying to model what would happen if these distortions continued. The results made him go silent for hours. The simulations showed that if teleportation use remained at its current level, the echoes would start merging into what he called dimensional feedback, a self-sustaining reaction that could spread through the entire solar system. He didn't know when it would happen, maybe years, maybe decades, but it would happen. He wanted to warn the world again, but this time he felt something deep inside him whisper, would they even listen? He decided to focus on finding a solution instead. He believed that if humanity could learn how to stabilize the echoes, to balance the energy rather than suppress it, maybe there was still hope. But every discovery came with more uncertainty. The deeper he studied, the more he realized that teleportation wasn't just a machine process. It was a direct interaction between consciousness and space. That's why people often described strange feelings during teleportation: disconnection, dizziness, or even déjà vu. The process didn't just move the body. It interacted with the mind. That revelation haunted him. It meant that teleportation was altering not just the physical world, but possibly the way reality itself registered human existence. Layla soon joined his effort. They began developing a device that could trace and neutralize teleportation echoes, something that could stabilize the distortions. It was small progress, but it gave them hope. However, time was running out. Reports from around the world were becoming impossible to hide. In some areas, teleportation zones glowed faintly even when not in use. People started hearing distant humming sounds at night, low vibrations that seemed to come from the sky. Scientists couldn't explain it, but they suspected it was linked to the feedback waves Rayhan had predicted. Even animals began behaving differently. Birds refused to fly near teleportation towers, and whales in the ocean changed their routes as if avoiding invisible zones. Nature itself seemed to be reacting. Still, people continued using teleportation. It was too convenient, too fast, too normal now. Humanity had built its comfort upon something unstable, and no one wanted to let it go. One evening, as Rayhan sat near his window, watching the fading sun, Layla called him. Her voice trembled slightly. "It started," she said. "The echoes have reached the upper atmosphere. Satellites can't read their own positions correctly anymore." Rayhan's heart sank. "That means the reaction has begun," he whispered. That night, he couldn't sleep. The wind outside howled strangely, carrying a low vibration through the air. He felt as if the sky itself was humming. When he looked up, he saw faint lines of light flickering in the clouds and like cracks spreading across a glass dome. The world didn't notice right away. The signs were subtle, but for those who understood, it was clear. Space had begun folding back upon itself, reacting to the countless teleportations that had disturbed its harmony. It wasn't destruction yet, but it was awakening. Rayhan looked at his notes one last time before closing his eyes. The pages were filled with calculations, theories, and sketches of waves and echoes. He whispered softly, "The universe isn't angry. It's just reminding us that it, too, is alive. And somewhere high above, beyond the reach of any machine, the stars seem to flicker, not with light, but with memory." Humanity had stepped too far into the unknown, and now the unknown was stepping closer in return. The world had become quieter in strange ways. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that hides something unsettling beneath it. The skies looked the same, but there was a stillness in the air that made people uneasy. It was as if the world was holding its breath. The teleportation towers still stood tall in every city, glowing faintly at night. People continued using them, but they no longer felt the same comfort they once did. Sometimes a faint echo of light followed travelers for a moment after they teleported. Sometimes shadows didn't fall exactly where they should. People noticed these things but quickly looked away. The world had grown too dependent on the technology to question it now. Rayhan had grown older and weaker. The long nights of research had left him fragile, yet his mind still burned with worry. He lived in a quiet coastal town, away from the noise of the cities. But even there, the signs were impossible to ignore. He often stood near the ocean, watching strange flashes on the horizon, faint waves of light moving through the clouds, like ripples across the sky. One evening, he received a message from Layla. It was short, just a few words. "It's happening faster. He knew what she meant. The feedback waves, the echoes of teleportation had started merging. They were no longer just appearing randomly. They were forming a pattern. Space itself seemed to be breathing, expanding and contracting like a living thing. Layla and a small team of scientists were now working in a hidden facility beneath an old observatory. They monitored the energy readings every hour, watching the numbers rise beyond anything seen before. The feedback had reached a point where it was feeding on itself, creating invisible ripples that spread across the solar system. Even the moon's reflection on water started to look different. Its light flickered slightly as though shining through layers of moving glass. One night, as Rayhan sat by his desk, he noticed that the clock on the wall had frozen. The second hand wasn't ticking. When he checked his phone, it too showed the same time, 3:17 a.m. He blinked in confusion. Then, a few moments later, everything resumed. The clock jumped forward by 2 seconds. It happened again the next night. And the night after. Time wasn't flowing smoothly anymore. He contacted Layla immediately. Her voice trembled as she explained, "It's not just you. We've confirmed temporal drift across multiple regions. Time is slipping." It was the final sign Rayhan had feared. The echoes had begun interfering with the fabric of time itself. Humanity had disturbed something much deeper than space. Despite the growing fear, life went on. The media avoided talking about the distortions. Governments reassured citizens that minor irregularities were being handled. Flights and teleportations continued, trade continued, and cities glowed brighter than ever. People wanted to believe everything was fine, but nature didn't lie. Birds started migrating in wrong directions. Oceans developed strange rhythmic tides that didn't match the moon's pull. And on some nights, the stars in the sky appeared to shift slightly, forming new constellations that vanished by morning. For most people, it was just rumor and curiosity. For scientists like Rehan and Layla, it was the beginning of the end. They worked day and night to finish the stabilizer, a small device that could balance the teleportation echoes and stop them from feeding back into the universe. It was built from leftover railgun components, a poetic reminder of where it had all begun. When they tested it for the first time, a soft pulse filled the room. The readings flattened for a moment. No spikes, no distortions, it worked. But only for a few seconds before the readings shot up again. Even stronger than before. The stabilizer couldn't handle the scale of the reaction anymore. The universe had grown too restless to be quieted by human tools. Rehan sat in silence afterward. "It's too big now," he said softly. "We can't stop it. We can only survive it." Layla looked at him, eyes filled with both fear and admiration. "Then we tell the world," she said, and they did. They released all their data publicly, thousands of pages of research, proof and recordings showing that the Earth's magnetic field, the moon's orbit, and even time itself were being distorted by humanity's use of teleportation. For a brief moment, the world froze. News outlets everywhere carried the story. People flooded the streets questioning, demanding answers. Governments scrambled to respond. The official message was calm. Temporary disturbances. We are working to correct them. But the truth could no longer be buried. Within days, major teleportation hubs began shutting down one after another. The world's economy started shaking. Goods couldn't move fast anymore. Businesses stalled, and fear spread faster than information. Yet despite the shutdowns, the distortions continued growing. The damage had already been done. One afternoon, as Layla looked at the live readings, she saw something terrifying. An enormous surge coming from deep space, moving toward Earth. It was as if the echoes humanity had sent out for years were finally returning all at once. She called Rehan immediately. He listened quietly as she described the data. When she finished, there was silence. Then he said softly, "The universe is answering." For hours, the sky around the world stayed unusually bright even though it was night. People stepped outside, watching the horizon glow faintly blue and silver. Some thought it was beautiful. Others felt a deep unease, like standing near something vast and alive. No explosions came. No destruction, just light. Waves of shimmering energy dancing through the clouds, moving slowly across continents. Teleportation devices everywhere flickered with the same glow. The feedback had reached its peak. The universe wasn't breaking. It was resetting its balance. All the scattered echoes, The fragments left behind by millions of teleports were merging back into one flow. For a few moments, everything connected: the ground, the sky, the sea, the stars. People everywhere felt a strange calm, as if time had paused again. Rayhan stepped outside his house and looked up at the sky. The ocean shimmered like liquid glass. The stars no longer twinkled. They pulsed gently and rhythmically like a heartbeat. He smiled faintly, tears in his eyes. "We did this," he whispered. "And yet, it's beautiful." He knew it was the universe finding balance again. Humanity had disturbed it, but the cosmos was far greater than human ambition. It could heal itself even if it meant changing everything humanity had built. The next morning, the lights were gone. The sky was clear. The world was silent, but something fundamental had changed. Teleportation no longer worked. Every device, every tower, every system connected to the teleportation network had gone offline permanently. The technology that once defined the modern world had vanished overnight. Engineers tried restarting it. Scientists rebuilt circuits, but nothing responded. It was as if the universe had quietly closed that door forever. At first, people panicked. Trade stopped, travel slowed, and life became harder. But slowly, something unexpected happened. Humanity began to adapt. People rediscovered older ways of moving and communicating. Airplanes returned to the skies. Ships once again crossed oceans. Local communities grew stronger, learning to rely on one another instead of instant global connections. And though life became slower, it also became quieter and somehow more human. Years later, children would listen to stories about teleportation the way people once listened to stories about dragons or magic, half believing, half wondering. The glowing towers still stood in some cities, empty and silent, monuments to an age of impossible speed. Rayhan spent his last years by the ocean, where he first dreamed of bending the laws of distance. Sometimes he would tell visiting students stories about the time when humanity could travel through light. They always asked the same question: was it worth it? He would smile gently and say, "Every discovery changes us. What matters is whether we remember the lesson it left behind." Layla continued teaching, guiding young scientists with a new philosophy: that progress should never race faster than understanding. Her research focused on harmony between technology and nature, not domination over it. The stars remained in their places again, stable and calm. The strange echoes faded over time, like ripples on water after a stone has settled. The world healed itself slowly, carrying the quiet memory of what had been lost and what had been learned. And though the teleporters never worked again, the spirit of discovery didn't die. Humanity learned to dream differently, not to control the universe, but to listen to it. One night, long after Rayhan had passed, Layla stood on the same beach where he once walked. The sea was calm and the moonlight shimmered across the water. For a brief second, she thought she saw a faint glow in the sky. The same soft light from years ago. Gentle and warm, she smiled and whispered, "Maybe the universe is saying thank you." The waves rolled gently against the shore, as if agreeing. The age of teleportation had ended. But the story of humanity, the curiosity, the courage, and the endless desire to reach beyond was still alive, glowing quietly under the stars that had once watched everything unfold. And somewhere in the infinite silence of space, the echoes of human discovery drifted peacefully, no longer a disturbance, but a song that whispered, "We learned, we changed, and we finally listened."